So joining us now to dig into some of the facts and controversial items of the bill is the executive director of GeorgiaCarry.org, a pro-amendment organization, Jerry Henry. Jerry, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Jerry, let's start this out. There are a lot of states that have certain rules and regulations right now, but is Georgia now becoming a template for other states in America to look at to prepare to pass their own gun legislation?
Well, we would like to think that. I certainly have no problem with thinking that, although there are states who still have less stringent requirements than we do in some instances.
Let's ask on a couple of the controversial items here, and we're going to put up a graphic here so our viewers can see it, and you won't be able to, but let me at least give you an idea of what we're talking about here. This is what many people consider to be holes in the law, such as dealers no longer need to maintain records of sales and purchases, the governor no authority to suspend or limit carrying or sale of guns, no fingerprint requirement for licenses. And here's the one that I think has a lot of people upset, the stand your ground issue. A person is immune from prosecution even if the weapon used in the violation is violating the Georgia Firearms and Weapons Act. These things sitting here right now, how would you answer those who say these are the mistakes you made and the holes that still have to be covered up?
Well, there's an awful lot of things that you threw there. I'll have to go back and try to remember some of them.
It's okay.
The first one is
one at a time. That's fine.
The first one is that the government, the state does not keep track of firearm sales. They don't need to. The feds do that. That's taken care of under the 4473 form. What was the next one?
You have the governor. You also have no fingerprint or requirement for licenses.
Well, no, that's no fingerprint requirement on renewals of license. The first license, you still have to have fingerprint.
No database of information. No database of information on licensed holders that spans multiple jurisdictions.
That's correct.
Doesn't that seem as if there should? Some people say there should be. We should be able to check against multiple jurisdictions.
Well, they can call the probate court where you got it to check to see if it's valid. And plus the fact now the license has been changed somewhat. It has our picture on it, and it's supposedly a very, very difficult license to counterfeit. So there's no need for a database. Otherwise, we'll wind up like they did in New York. Somebody publishing where everybody is that has a firearms license.
Let's get to the stand your ground. A person is immune from prosecution even if the weapon that is used is in violation of the Georgia Firearms and Weapons Act. Would you explain that briefly?
Well, that's not the way it actually states. What it states is that a person using a weapon in an off-limits location would not be charged with the crime of carrying into an off-limits place right now. Stand your ground is stand your ground, and that's an immunity. And just because I say it that I stood my ground doesn't mean that I'm going to get to do that. And what most people are complaining is that allows felons to do that. Well, guess what? Felons are already allowed to stand your ground and use that immunity if they are being attacked by someone. If they're carrying a firearm and they're a felon, they've already broken the law, and so they're not going to get off with anything. They just may be able to live over it.
Jerry, it's former Congressman J.D. Hayworth of Arizona also in on this, and the question I have for you, you know, the state I represented in Congress for a dozen years, while there is a concealed carry permit, now in Arizona you don't even have to have that. I believe Arizona and Vermont and possibly Wisconsin, possibly Alaska. I'll get this out in a second,
Alaska.
Jerry. Yeah,
Alaska.
Are the states where you don't even need concealed carry. Given this expansion of gun rights in Georgia, are there some things that were left off this bill that you wanted to see enacted and that you're going to try to push for in the next meeting of the Georgia legislature?
Well, yes, there were. However, constitutional carry that you're referring to, that's actually available in 5 states. But we're not pushing for that right now because of the fact that we think it's easier to get some of these places that are off limits when it'll be off limits to a licensed carrier. Once we succeed in that, then we'll look at the licensing problem. One of the things we'd like to do right now is be able to carry on campus, which you can't do here in the state of Georgia. There's Georgia Tech is here in Atlanta, and that has been rated the last 3 years by the FBI as the 12th, 11th, and now it's the 10th most dangerous campus in the United States. And we think that anybody that's over 21 and attends that college should be allowed to defend themselves in some of those late night incidents.
Well, when you talk about firearms on college campuses, and of course we've seen episodes where there have been grave concerns. It's interesting you mentioned Georgia Tech. I'm sitting here alongside an alum of the University of Georgia in Athens. Does the same concern exist there for UGA that exists in Atlanta with Georgia Tech?
Certainly it does, along with Georgia State, which is also in Atlanta. Every state or every campus in the state of Georgia that exists. As a matter of fact, I believe, and I'm coming from the top of my head, but there were something like 89 forcible rapes last year on college campuses. There were 180-something violent attacks, and that doesn't sound to me like it's all safe, like the Board of Regents would like you to believe.
John, you got a lot of pals still in Georgia.
Well, certainly. I mean, it's a little bit different situation from the University of Georgia, which is in Athens, compared to Georgia Tech and Georgia State, which are right there in downtown Atlanta and right next to a part of the town which up until recently would be considered sort of a transitional area, if we want to be fair about this. But really, we shouldn't be that surprised that Georgia is the state. I came from Georgia, of course, and when I was born back in 1979, we lived in a town called Kennesaw, and there was a law requiring every resident of that town to own a firearm,
right,
even back then.
Still
so
is.
This is, and still is in Kennesaw, my place of birth. So this is par for the course for the state of Georgia, and people are very up on this issue of Second Amendment rights, as we've seen from this law.
Well,
Jerry?
I hope we are. Yes, sir.
Jerry, 30 seconds, just a final word. Why
Well,
was this when there are people sitting out there and they're going to Georgia now is just going to be a place where guns are running wild at this point? How do you answer those people?
Every time that we pass a bill, which in the last 6 years we've passed 3 good gun bills, we hear the same hue and cry from the emotional output of our anti-people, our opponents, saying that this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and guess what? It never happens, it hasn't happened, and you're not going to see anything except the crime rate go down in the state of Georgia.
We will make that the last word. Jerry Henry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate it.
I think everybody's going to be watching those crime stats with an eye on every single 10th from now on for at least the next few years to see what happens, certainly the next 6 months.
You know that'll happen, Ed. We thank you very much for that. Coming up, a new report on Benghazi saying the U.S. has switched sides in the war on terror. That's straight ahead as America's Forum continues. Stay tuned.